Hello, today I'm going to talk about the game Time War, a game of time travel and conflict from Yaquinto in 1979. Definitely has that 70s kind of art to it. My box, a little bit beat up. Typical Yaquinto kind of big box. 2 to 4 players. You can play it solo too, pretty easily I think. Goes 1 to 2 hours. It's towards the more complex games. A little bit of theme. Time War is an exciting new technical level game that begins in the future. A future where governments, using their ability to send men and equipment into time, fight their wars and vie for power in the past. Highly evolved computers predict the John Bar junctions, critical moments in history, and what actions can be taken by the time forces to create a favorable change in the power balance of their own time. Time War allows each player to assume the role of the time magistrate and control the time forces of a government. Operating from a floor plan of a time-controlled building, players must allocate funds to various areas of research and development, from equipment, training members of the time forces, inherent technicians, and the enormous energy cost of moving people and equipment in and out of the past. So a very, very unique game. So the components, there's the rules, typical Yaquinto rules, not super linear, some examples. Got to jump around a little bit. 16 pages. Player aid chart. A lot of useful information here. There's it's called altering time, and you have a certain chance of doing that. That's what this is for. If you alter it but can't control it, then you shift where you don't want to go, where you don't necessarily want to go, and that's what this table's for. And then also this to show you where you go when you mess with time, but you don't really control it. There's projections when they send you back in time, recoveries when they bring you back, transfers, moving around in the past. And that's the successive that is shown here. Point table is a way of capturing your victory points. In optional rules, you allocate funds to do research and development. Combat table. Well, you just have combat values, and then you use some of those combat values to figure out your combat scores. And if you do the optional funding, then there's cost for units. And for projection recovery, 2 of those. And there's a log sheet. It's very, there's not a lot to keep track of. It's actually, you basically keep track of your movement and your missions, and that's all that this is for. And it's got these things to kind of hide what you're doing from your opponents. They use these in a few of the games. It's like a screen. I guess the concept is that your opponent does not look over the 2-inch high screen to see what you're doing. There's these Time War cards, and these are your missions. So there's various missions, and this adds, the flavor and fun to the game. Like 1950, convince Truman not to order development of the first hydrogen bomb. And they have a typical Yaquinto tray, which is great. I really like the trays. Good number of components. Of course, the infamous Yaquinto nice dice. There's 4 different, up to 4 players. All the components are identical within. They're just different, by their colors. Detail on the counters. So there's a lot of counters, not huge variety within them, but it's got enough here to make the game interesting. These are time flow arrows that show your effects on time. And there's different kind of units that travel around. There's sentinels, wardens, agents, action teams, which are a combination of 3 of the units. And these are trainees that get trained to be one of these things. And each of these come in a complete set of the different colors. This is just to show the different colors. So, and what's interesting about the different types, they're differentiated. They all have unique names, which is nice. So they go by like the first letters. So you'd say, okay, Agent C or Agent D. And each of these have different effects on how well they complete different missions and how far back they can go into time. In the buildings, there's technicians that basically maintain there's computers and there's projectors, so those affect how well you can travel in time, and you need the level of technician you have dictates the level of computer or projector you can use. Computers, projectors, and technicians come in levels 1, 2, and 3 depending on the technology level, and they have different abilities. And then for the resources, there's resource markers if you do the optional resource rules. There's researchers, and then there's instructors. So the map is very well done. Like I said, it's very colorful. It's made out of this kind of medium thickness cardstock. It lays down fine. It'd be nice for a little bit thicker, but it's robust enough. These are the different time zones, and the further you go back towards the centers, the further you go back in time. This is like past 2000, in the future a little bit from us, but in the present in their time. This is like 500 million BC. These are directions, so you say if you want to go in the pi or infinity direction, that affects how you go around. These lines are where you put your time flow markers, and these are where you put. Yellow would put their units here, like when they're in zone C, etc. Green would put their units here. So that's where the individual units go. But when they're on a C, it's the same as being in the C green is, so they would combat if they're in the same zone, for instance. So that's that. And then the distance between what your home line and where the marker is dictates how many victory points you get, and that's just what these are for, to show distance between the lines. Then there's fund allocation, which is for the different resources, optional rules. And then these are where you develop your units. You pass them through here. You send a trainee through here, and then you just follow the arrows to see. Each game turn you can move one of these boxes, and then if you can exit, that means you have a completed unit. Like for instance, in 2 turns you can have a complete sentinel, in 4 you can have a complete warden. Computer center, time travel, this is where you keep the computer and technician, and here's the projector and technician. This is where you do your research and development, and training, holding. So before you project them into the past on the board, first you put them in the holding box. But before you put them in the holding box, they have to be in the administration, generally for a turn, before they can go here and then project in the past. So this is like, they're kind of training in for the mission, they go to the holding, and they get projected in the past. And these are identical for each of the different colors. So that's the board. Overall, the theme and the component are great. It's different periods in history. It goes from 550 million to the present time as of the game, which is 2075, and goes in increments in between. So the scale is in time, not distance, which is used to keep track of for each of the types of units: sentinels, wardens, agents, action teams. You basically say what you're going to be doing each time. You give them movement and an assignment. Movements being project, transfer, recover, projector equipment or personnel. Assignment is a pi or infinity time alteration direction, guard or seek and destroy. Then the time war cards. So there's 36, and each player gets 3, and then they maintain 3 as they use them. For instance, it gives a date, location, and mission section. For instance, 1790. These are more detailed than year. Charleston, Massachusetts. Prevent the birth of Samuel F.B. Morse. Here it shows for the different types of units, a minus is you reduce your dice roll for the time alteration by that amount. If it's plus, you increase your die roll that amount. 0, you don't. If there's an X, it means you can't use that unit for that particular one. Project means you're sending a field operative into the past. To transfer, you're moving a field operative that's already in the past from one point another in the past. Recover, you're drawing them back from the past. So there are movement codes, and then the assignment codes, like I said, they're time alter in the pi direction, time alter in infinity direction. And the movement and assignment codes together are referred to as the field operatives mission. Basic game rules, sequence of play. All players plot their log sheets, movements, and missions. And in the optional rule, there's allocations where you can acquire resources to develop your technology and to buy units. So that's the first phase, doing your log sheet. Second, you reveal your log sheet to the other player. Phase 3, place all units that are plotted to be projected into the paths in the holding box. Phase 3, players going one at a time, attempt to execute their plotted movement. Phase 5, do all combat in the past. Phase 6, all time alterations are attempted. Phase 7, determine gain points. 8, training advancement. 9, recruitment phase. After players complete the phase, the game move is completed and you proceed to do the next phases. You attempt to project, you refer to your level of projector, and if you're doing projection or transfer, roll 2 dice, and then you either are accurate or you're positive in terms of moving back in time or negative, and then you move it that amount of distance. If they're inaccurate, they move off the board, the unit is lost. The chrono computer, which is this item, it's a level 1. The time you can only try to do time alteration in areas A, B, and C, which are more recent ones. So level 2, you can attempt to do time alteration in all the way through J, which is more distant past. So level 3, it's all the time back to hundreds of millions of years ago. Projector is the time travel equipment. It comes in levels 1, 2, and 3. Put the unit counter in the time travel equipment room. In the basic game, you don't move it or replace it. In the optionals, it's never moved, but you may increase the technology level of it. Its level represents the ability to move operatives into and around the past. A level 1 projection can move 2 units per game for move. 2 can move up to 3. 3 can move up to 4. That's projection, transfer, or recovery. So transfer is when you move around within, you're in the past, you're moving around in the past. Recovery is when you come back from the past, and project when you go to the past. Combat is when players of different colors are in the same Joan bar junction, which is the distance, in the past, like A, B, C, D. So total combat value is determined by the combat value chart. So Sentinel is value 4, Action Team 9, etc. See a total, the value for each unit counter present in the junction app, the value for each player. Each player rolls 2 dice. After obtaining the total of the 2 die rolls, the player then adds the total combat value to his total. The combination of these two makes the combat score, and the player with the highest combat score is the winner. And the other player must remove all the unit counters. So all combats are the ones closest to the center are at the most distant time are done first. To do time alterations, so you go to the time alteration table, you take your type of unit, you look at the time frame, you roll a dice, and sometimes there's a modifier, like an action team would have a -1, and these are modifications to your die roll. You roll a 6-sided dice, and if the result is that number or less, you're successful. So for an agent in time frame B to C, if they get a 1 or less, if there's no modifiers, then they are able to alter time. And once you alter time, it's a matter of whether it's controlled or not. And to see if it's controlled, you roll 2 6-sided dice, and it shows a range here. So in the different time frames, like F for instance, if of the 2 dice you get a number between 5 and 9, then it's controlled. If it's controlled, then you move the amount you indicate, or you move it either in the pi or infinity direction. And if you control it and you have a time war card in that time frame, then you can change this time marker to your color to show that you are controlling that. But if it's not controlled, then you do the controlled alteration, and you roll. This is the time frame. This is the time range, the control range from here. You do 2 6-sided dice, and then based on the result, you modify it in the pi or infinity direction by that amount, and you do that in addition to where you're planning to go in the first place. Assignments. So once you assign, whether it's time alteration, a guard, or seek and destroy, you can't change. Guard, you basically get a combat bonus. So that's the benefit of being a guard. Seek and destroy, they can transfer along in time for different assignments. They don't have to project back to get a different assignment. Ones that go on a time alteration assignment, they have to project back. And so the arrows, when you change the furthest one in, if you move that in a direction, everything further out from that moves in the same direction. Training, you move in the different boxes. In each game turn, you move up a box. If you start a sentinel, if you had a trainee in sentinel here, you'd move up here, and then the next turn you'd have to move. Either you could become a sentinel, go out, or you could move on to be trained as a warden. So the arrows show you where you can keep going or you can get out. And then also in the training recruitment phases, when you would get new ones, and it varies on the scenario. Victory conditions. The first player to accumulate 20 victory points wins. And the way the victory points work is there's this chart which shows the points, and you have something called the home line. It's the line shown here, the radial line that's by where your setup is, and that's your kind of home line. And the distance from that, like if you were 2 lines away from that, that'd be a distance of 2. And then the time you are in the past dictates how many victory points you get. And your victory points you add all the victory points from your moves that turn, and then you keep track of them on the sheet. It's for that turn, and even if you move in different positions after that time, it doesn't matter. It's just per turn. So when you get that point, it stays there, and then what you do the next turn is counted from that, and then you look at the cumulative of that. So as far as when you get 20, then you win. There's optional rules, mainly about allocation. That adds another layer of depth. So it's basically you buy things, you get better technology, the administrative cost. And then there's scenarios. There's a basic game scenario, which I'll do. And there's some that use more of optional rules. And there's one where you can set up, what kind of equipment you have. And there's one that's set up based on arrow locations, and then I'll get into setup. And I'll show setup here. So the scenario I'm doing is the basic game scenario. You can also do it with the optional resource allocation rules. I'm not going to do that. It's just it adds a lot of good depth to the game, but for the purposes of demonstrating the basic game stuff, I'll just do without the funding allocation. So first of all, the kind of generic setup prior to the scenario. So first of all, you set up the time flow markers on each of the eras, A through L, on the 0. So I've shown here. And then each player gets 3 time war cards. Obviously the players won't know what each other has, but just to show you where I'm starting out. So yellow has an E, one in era E, G, and B, and green is in eras I, F, and F. So for instance, in the era G, you'll want to prevent Martin Luther King from posting his theses for some reason. In Era F, for green, you'd want to aid Napoleon in his coup against the Directory. So each player gets 3 of those, and that's non-scenario specific. And then in the specific scenario, each player gets a level 3 computer, and that'll be placed in the computer center. Each player gets a level 3 projector, and that's in the time travel components center. Each player receives a level 3 computer technician, level 3 projector technician, and that's in the computer center and the time travel center. And each player gets 4 trainees in the 2 Sentinel and 2 Warden training rooms. So, Warden training rooms, Sentinel training rooms. And then they'll get 1 trainee per game move. Each player gets 4 Sentinels whose names begin with A, B, C, D, shown here. Like I said, it's interesting they do it where they go by the letters, but then they also have unique names. They get 4 Wardens whose names begin with E, F, G, and H, shown here. 2 agents whose names begin with I and J. It turns out there's not agents that begin with I and J, so I went with A and B. And then action teams numbers 1 and 2. And they all start off the game in the administrative area here. And it's assumed that they've completed 1 turn there, and then when you begin play you can start moving them around. And then to keep track of those units, here's a time log sheet, so basically indicating the units you have of Sentinels, Wardens, agents, and action teams for yellow and green. And like I said, I'm not doing the fund allocation part. If you were, though, you'd be using the fund allocation chart here. Then I'll get into play. So I'm here in turn 3, and I'll walk through where I'm at and walk through an example turn. Yellow has a few items. They have a warden in time zone E and in G. They actually lost a unit because they were inaccurate in their projection, and they're off by 2, and they're trying to get to B, and he ended up off the board, so he went in the future and was lost. They were able to shift a time. They did succeed in they were able to aid Lambert Stevens in the development of the fusion engine in time zone B, and because of that they were able to shift zone B over in the pi direction, but then subsequently green was able to shift it over in the infinity direction. So there's been some movement there. They've been developing their units. They have several in the administration. One that they got back that's sitting there now, ready to go. So their time war cards they have now are in B. They're looking to delay launching of a Jovian moon mining expedition. In E, they're looking to, unfortunately, assassinate Lincoln. G, in 1517, they want to prevent Martin Luther from posting his 95 theses. That's where that's at. Over in green, they were able to do they did a shift in I, but was uncontrolled, so it just shifted over in the infinity direction, but they weren't able to change that to their color. They did do a controlled time alteration in F, which shifted it over here, and everything else beyond that over here too. And of course they got some victory points for that, as yellow also got victory points. So that's the situation, and now let's get into a turn. So the first part of the turn, update log sheets on missions and movement. As far as yellow, B has returned, and E has yet to complete their mission, and G has yet to complete their mission, so they'll stay there. So they'll want to send another one to B. For that mission, you can either use an action team or agent, and we have an action team, so we'll put action team A, and we'll say that that's going to go, it's going to project to B in the bi-direction. So we'll put him in the holding. They can do up to 3 more movements, so they're going to send one over to I and try to combat that agent. He will project to I for a search and destroy. So they have no other missions to cover. Well, they do have, they'll send one more to E to support them. So that'll be a guard. And those are the only ones that'll move there. And then for G, they have some on I and F. And he wasn't on search and destroy, so he's got to come back to get a different mission. And they will send the G Sentinel, which recently completed training. They'll send them to C. And they'll bring it in the infinity direction. And then they'll send one more. They'll send an action team to, or do you search and destroy on G. So tap to execute the movements. Go with yellow first. So the projection accuracy, they have a, well, first of all, they'll work back. Project I. So they have 3, 6, they're fine. He's on a search and destroy. The warden, G, is going to go to E for a guard. See how that goes. Projecting. Accurate. And then the action team will project to B. Accurate. Okay. And then for green, they will recall E. 7, or recover. Accurate. Comes back, and he goes to administration when he comes back. G for search and destroy. Projecting. So they were not accurate. So -1, and they're going to G. So they end up here. Projecting to C for mission. Accurate. Okay. Then they do combat. So let's see, we have combat here. We have, if they're in the same thing, they have to do combat. So we have I. They both have an agent. Combat value for an agent is 3. They're both the same, so you roll this. For yellow, it's 9 plus 3, 12. For green, it's 7 plus 3, 10. So green loses. They remove them board. Other combat, there's no other combat. And then we attempt the time alterations. We'll go with yellow first, and we'll start back here and move forward. So yellow is trying on E. They're still trying to alter. So, and also a G. Start with a G. So G, it's a warden. So it's a +1 to the die roll. So 4. And he's in the time frame of G. And he would need a 2 or less, so he is unsuccessful. And then for E, it's a warden. It's a 0 modifier for the warden, so roll. Time zone, or they need a 1 or less, they got a 2, so they weren't able to do that. And then B, a action team, they get a 2. So they are able to alter that, and they're moving it in the pie direction. They alter it. Now we can see if it's controlled or not. So you roll it. A 4 in B for an action team, you need to be between a 3 and 11, and they are. So it's controlled, and it moves in their direction, and then anything beyond it moves as well. Yellow's done. We'll complete this turn and do green. So let's see what green's doing. Green is doing at F. They're going to attempt with a action team and a -1 on the roll. So they need a 4 or less. They did not succeed. So it was a 6 minus a 1, 5. And then they're going to try on C with a sentinel. And unfortunately, they just have a sentinel there and they can't do it with a sentinel, so they can't do that. They'll have to get a different unit there. And it doesn't exist anymore because they got lost in combat, so that's all they were able to do. So looking at game points now, see, just look at what happened in this turn. Yellow was able to move B in their favorable time direction. So that's 4 away from their home line, and that's too far away for them to get any points. If they'd been 3 and they were in level B, they would have gotten 3, but they don't get any. Now we have to advance the units in training. You follow the arrows. So we'll let him be a sentinel. He's completed the training. Put him in the administrative area. Him up. We'll move these other ones up. This one's working to be an agent. This one's going to be an agent, and then we'll have this one working to be an agent as well. And next turn we'll get another agent. Over here, we'll get. So we'll take a warden out here. We'll replace the trainee for a warden. Put him in the administrative. We'll move. Continue agent training. Working on a warden. And have him go to warden. And then in this scenario, each turn you acquire another trainee, and we'll have them enter in sentinel training. So that's the end of a turn. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of flavor of how it goes. So that's Time War from Yaquinto in 1979. It's a fun time travel game. Like Yaquinto, I always like Yaquinto components, their dice and their counters, and it's a nice colorful map here too. Not too intense, but very colorful and functional. The game art is literally hypnotic. Definitely looks like the 70s. A lot of neat things going on, and I just did one aspect of it, but you can also do the resources, which adds another level of depth to it. Gives enough flavor by giving you different missions. And there's a lot of strategy as far as what's your purpose of traveling in time? Are you going to just develop your stuff or get the other guy? So there's combat, there's research. I think it's a really fun game. Highly recommend it. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. It's unique, and that's one reason I want to give it a good score. Time War from Yaquinto, 1979.